Joker is the latest Warner Brothers / DC Comics film, and this time we follow an original origin story for what is probably the most famous comic book villain of all time, the Joker. Well, it's finally here. Today is Joker Day. I've got about 3 hours until our showtime. I've been so excited for this film ever since it was announced back when Martin Scorsese was still attached to the project as a producer. And of course, you know, there were the talks about who would portray the Clown Prince of Crime. I remember at one point Leonardo DiCaprio was attached to the role, but then that didn't seem to pan out. But honestly, as much as I love DiCaprio, ever since Joaquin Phoenix was announced as the Joker, as the solid pick to play the Joker, I didn't want anybody else in the role. I've loved him ever since I saw him first as Johnny Cash in I Walk the Line, and then I've enjoyed him in many other movies, even movies that I don't particularly care for, like Gladiator, which is not a popular opinion in any way. I know that much. And I also have to mention his role in The Master, where he played opposite of Philip Seymour Hoffman. That was such a fantastic performance, and sadly, I still haven't seen a couple of his more recent performances that were considered amazing, including that indie film, You Were Never Really Here. Just, Joaquin Phoenix is one of our true treasures as far as the acting world goes, and of course, I wasn't surprised to hear the hype around him and his performance out on the festival circuit. And so because of all of that hype, it's been hard to not listen to everything, and it's definitely been hard keeping my expectations in check. And this has been an interesting movie to actually watch the development of, and, you know, just hear the word of mouth on. I mean, in this society where we're accustomed to big-budget comic book movies, and large film cinematic universes with interconnected films especially, it can be easy for one to feel fatigued. Now, I'm not saying that comic book fatigue isn't real, or is, but I will say that I don't agree with what the media labels as comic book fatigue. What they label it as, it's been disproven over the past couple of years, especially in regards to how many comic book movies we've been getting every year, and yet it seems like people are spending more money on them, which is the complete opposite of what they're all suggesting. But anyway, that being said, too much of something can be bad if film studios don't at least take chances on making more films that are treated like event films, but they're given more of a mid-sized budget, like with Joker. This movie cost about $60 million. That's a small fraction of what a normal blockbuster comic book movie is these days. You know, it's closer to an indie film than what we consider these days to be a blockbuster. I mean, we wouldn't have blockbusters without movies like Jaws and Star Wars setting up the stage. And as far as budgets, those movies can be compared to today's indie films, really. So without indie films, we wouldn't have gotten blockbusters, really. And smaller films can be as influential on the landscape as a big film that costs north of $150 million, for instance. But anyway, I'm rambling. Back to my point. We are so accustomed by a certain type of film, especially when it comes to superhero and comic book movies, that when DC decided to focus more on standalone films, you know, things started feeling a bit different, and maybe even better, because it was DC trying to do their own thing instead of following in the suit of Marvel like they originally did when they started implementing Man of Steel, then Batman vs. Superman, then trying to shoehorn in Justice League way too quick. And just, I don't know, it doesn't matter whether I enjoyed those movies that I mentioned or any of the other ones in that lineup at all, but it still feels even more different with the Joker now on the scene. The other films before, like Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Shazam, though they're standalone movies, they're still part of the makeup of a cinematic universe that to my knowledge, still doesn't have an official title as far as Warner Brothers. We call it the DCEU, but they keep saying, no, that's not what it's called. And then I think they explained it, but it's something kind of stupid. But anyway, I really don't remember what it is. But yeah, those movies were part of, you know, the cinematic makeup. Whereas this one, they've decided to go with an Elseworlds direction with Joker. And for those of you who don't know what that word is, Elseworlds, it just basically means it's a term used in DC Comics when a story being told is not part of the overarching canon of DC Comics at the time. It's its own self-contained story, and Joker is promised as a standalone story, therefore Elseworlds, and that's extremely intriguing, especially if it becomes financially successful enough to justify making more of these smaller Elseworlds stories where a director can just go in and create their own story and just have fun and kind of experiment with the genre, like this movie obviously is. And I want more of these. I want more standalone comic book movies in, you know, along with the interconnectivity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I want all of it. It's been a while since there were, It's been a while since those types of films were a major focus, either standalone movies or maybe just a couple of connected movies that focused more on a specific person or group, like the X-Men. That wasn't considered a connected universe until maybe around the time that Deadpool showed up, but that's a separate story. Anyway, now of course, I can't talk about the Joker. I can't talk about the movie Joker without talking about the controversy around it. While many have praised this this film, even some calling it a cinematic masterpiece, we all know not everybody thinks that, and some people think that for a very specific reason. Now, I understand that people are allowed to feel sensitive and uncomfortable towards certain things, like the mere mention of cancer, because they've had somebody close to them die from cancer, and the pain from that is all too real. I get that. Or even if you or somebody you know was somehow involved in a mass shooting, which we've been getting a lot of in more recent years. But, so I'm not diminishing the importance about how you or anybody else feels, and I understand why people would be hesitant to, you know, want to see this film. I understand it as much as someone like me who hasn't really gone through any or any tragedy in my life can understand completely. That being said, there are many articles and outlets that have been talking recently about their worries that a film like Joker, in which the main character is somebody who is basically formed into a homicidal maniac by society in a way, could be seen as far too sympathetic and could end up inspiring another mass killing. And it's hard to stay away from the recent memory of the 2012 Colorado shooting that happened during a Dark Knight Rises screening. Everybody has heard about that, at least in some form or fashion. And I don't know, there's so many people running with this story that it could inspire this kind of person. Even some outlet articles of people who haven't even seen the film yet. The film had only been out for a certain amount of time through the festival circuits, and just it started exploding, and you could tell that a lot of people hadn't actually seen the movie. Now, I can't guarantee this, but I'm pretty sure that this movie's not going to have a very high body count, or at least it won't compared to a single John Wick movie. And we love that movie. We don't say it glorifies violence, and yet this movie does or will? I mean, it sounds like a bit of a double standard to me, if I'm being honest. And besides, it's not the job of a film studio to teach morality lessons. As Joaquin Phoenix recently said in an interview, film is art, and art can be used to showcase our society, and it seems like that's what's happening with the Joker, only we have become so oversensitive to things that we won't be honest with the issues, or with any issue these days. and we just ignore it and move on. But since there's a film that's putting the violence our society experiences regularly in the spotlight right in our faces, people don't seem to like it. They just want to ignore it and move on. And there's honestly a difference between being sensitive to something and being oversensitive, and that's all I wanted to say on that portion. But anyway, let's get into my expectations of Joker. Really, this is interesting because I think the channel yourmoviesucks.org, which you guys should really check out, I'll leave a link to their channel in the description down below. He said it best in his review, which is basically what I was expecting, which is whatever your expectations are going in, Joker is going to be one of those movies where, whatever you're expecting going in, you'll basically get it. Are you expecting to love it? You will. Are you expecting to hate it? You will. And that seems to be the trend with most everyone that I've seen online. And as far as me personally goes, I'm kind of expecting to like it at least, but I will do my best to keep my expectations in check and to leave them at the frickin' door. Okay, so anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to my long-ass rant and just anticipation and expectations and all that shit. Just thanks. So I will be leaving soon-ish for the movie. My wife and I are seeing it in this new movie theater that opened up a little while ago. It's a movie and dinner that's attached to a nearby casino. And we've never been to it, so I'm really excited for that. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump into my normal disclaimer. So for those of the uninitiated, the way that I break down my thoughts on a movie is I do a pro and con list. It helps me to best compartmentalize everything that I think about the movie, good or bad. And while I try to keep the sections separate, if I can make a pro and con work off of each other, or they're intrinsically tied together, then I will definitely take advantage of that. Anyway, there's your disclaimer. When I come back, I will have seen Joker, and we can talk about it. So you guys have fun. I'm gonna do some kind of weird spinning animation thing. Woo!
Gotham's lost its way. What kind of coward would do something that cold-blooded? Someone who hides behind a mask.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy, but now I realize it's a comedy.
Send in the clowns.
So let's just get the one thing out of the way that everyone agrees on, whether they love the movie or they hate the movie. Everybody agrees that Joaquin Phoenix is amazing in this movie. This is another mesmerizing performance by him, and this is the best Joker portrayal since Ledger. Phoenix is hauntingly perfect in this role, especially once he begins to put on the makeup and it starts to signify his near full and also his full transformation into the Clown Prince of Crime. Now, I'm not going to go into the debate of which one's better, Phoenix or Ledger. I don't want to do that. Okay, here's my opinion. Heath Ledger's performance will always be the more iconic one compared to Phoenix. I think in the long run, that's how I'm viewing it. However, they're on the same level as far as performance. Phoenix's performance is just as revelating and as great as Ledger's was. And I can't decide which is better, because there's no way to actually do it, and also I really don't want to. I'd rather just leave it at they're both great. These are both peak performances for this character, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Both performances are celestial in a way, but for different reasons. They are much different Jokers, and also I'm gonna call it right now. Not only is Phoenix gonna get an Oscar nom, I'm gonna call it right now. He's going to win. He's going to fucking win the Oscar for Best Actor in the 2020 Academy Awards. You can bet on it. But back to this version of the Joker, Arthur Fleck. It is very strange to get an origin for this character outside of the comics, and even then, there's no real origin story, per se. They feel more like theories and potentials, and it doesn't even really matter. I mean, it sure doesn't to the Joker himself in the comics. I mean, he has said once or twice before in the comics, and I'm pretty sure I'm paraphrasing, if I have to have an origin, I'd rather it be multiple choice. It's something like that. And like in the comics, this is a way to, this is a way that he could have formed, but not the way. And that's really how I felt that this version of the Joker was kind of staged as a character, as just another possible mold. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you are, and what your mileage is as far as, like, if you are okay with this being a standalone story, or if you really want this to connect to everything that has come before and will come after. But personally, I think it's great either way. And as the filmmakers suggested when they started making this movie, this is not a normal comic book movie. The comic book nature is more like garnish on top of an already excellent dish that you'd get at a 4 or 5 star restaurant. And compared to Logan, that's the first movie that popped in my head, and plus it was the more recent one. Logan, which is still steeped heavily in the comic book trappings, simply because if you take out the part about the mutants, then Logan's kind of missing a bit of something. When you really look at it, Joker can truly stand alone as a character study about this person who's ignored by society and is also shaped by it, and the events happening around him as well, who ends up becoming something worse than he already was. And it doesn't need the DC Comics trappings. They're just a bonus that doesn't interrupt the flow of the movie. And in this grounded film, you can really see what the Joker alludes to in the comics with Batman, how in the Joker's mind, Batman's not too far off from actually becoming like the Joker, or at least that's what the Joker believes, because to quote him, all it takes is one bad day, and Arthur Fleck has a hell of a bad day to start all of this out. And in this film, we see this man who we should feel bad for, because a lot of shit happens to him that honestly shouldn't, and he doesn't deserve. At least, like, when we meet him, he doesn't deserve them. And once that day occurs, we start to see his mental state further deteriorate. And even with the moments where we should feel sorry for him, I know I had a few moments where I did, especially. The choices made in turn made it very difficult to root for him or someone like him. The film walks that fine line between exploration of this kind of person and validation of this kind of person. And instead of being able to validate what he does, because he does some pretty awful shit in this movie, we still continue to watch because we're just so enthralled with what's going on. We're so fascinated by Arthur Fleck, Joker, and we're just dying to see what he'll do next. And I still believe what I did before I saw this film. This film does not glorify violence, nor does it put a maniac like Joker up on a pedestal as many of Gotham's citizens do in this film. Hell, I was even right earlier. This does not have even close to the body count of a John Wick movie. It's at least 10 plus times the body count in just the first John Wick movie compared to this one. Just, Joker is merely what I've been saying, especially many times before, and many of the other people that I watch online, like Chris Stuckman and Jeremy Johns and John Campea especially. It's a way for us to look into that kind of world and inside that kind of mind. It's an upsetting allegory of neglect and violence in a world that tends to ignore that there are issues with itself that need to be addressed. Our world, a world that needs a cautionary tale like Joker, reminding us that if society is ignorant to those that are less fortunate, it will end up creating this kind of person, and I'm pretty sure that it has multiple times before, and will even after this video. But now I'm going to touch on more light topics. Other than that, I'm going to touch more on, like for instance, as far as the film's presentation itself goes, the film is shot impeccably and staged meticulously. The production design is excellent, seemingly making it look and feel like it's taking place in the 1980s. And yet, it also feels like it takes place today, which I'm pretty sure was the goal, so good on them. It really worked. And not to mention the minimalist yet robust in many great ways musical score created by the composer of Chernobyl. I would say her name, but I'm pretty sure that I will butcher it because I can't read her name. But after Chernobyl and this, she does not deserve to have her name butchered by a high school educated Southern boy. If I did have to pick out a flaw with this movie, it's really in almost any character other than Joaquin Phoenix, so mostly the supporting characters. Many of the supporting characters have a more, I guess you could say, a cartoonish demeanor about them compared to the more realistic and grounded sense that the film has chosen to project, either through the story or even just through the visuals of the film itself. And I don't know, they begin making decisions that don't really make any sense on either a logical level or even when you throw movie logic into the mix, they just don't make any sense. And now, there are some characters that are given explanations for their behavior, and there was actually one in particular that actually upped the intrigue of the movie for me, which was really nice, but there were some that just didn't act natural. I mean, sure, Gotham City's not exactly known as the most non-toxic place in the comics. Hell, it was already fucked up before Bruce Wayne actually put on the cowl and became Batman, though technically he became Batman when his parents died in that alley. But anyway, that's arguing semantics. It's obvious Gotham City and its denizens are obviously not normal people, as they show in the difference between the rich and the not-so-rich in this movie. But some things were just not explained well enough as far as the more in-the-moment character motivations. Now, there is one supporting character that did stand out among the rest, and it was the late-night talk show host, who was played by Robert De Niro. I was personally worried that he would phone it in and would basically play himself, but he gave a really good performance, and I honestly believed him as a real live talk show host. But even his character isn't immune to the occasional stupid decision. And that has been my review of Joker. I walked out of this film simply awestruck. This is another example of how comic book films are becoming more than just what their genres say they should be, or what others say that the genre should be. We've already had multiple films prove that, like the Dark Knight trilogy and Logan, and I would even say M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But there are still those out there, especially in Hollywood, who would have everyone believe that anything even related to superheroes or comic books is nothing more than entertaining drivel, and that a movie like Logan is just a fine superhero movie, but because the origins of the character comes from a comic book where the character wears yellow and blue spandex, you know, that it basically means that it somehow lessens the quality of the film. And I really hope that this is going to be another film in that list of films that I listed, and maybe some other ones that I didn't think to list, that just, you know, it gets those objectors to be more open-minded about something adapted from a book filled with pictures and words that aren't children's books. And for the film, I recommend everybody go out to see it. Even if you weren't looking to see it, you should at least experience it and form your own opinion on that, whether it's the same opinion that I have or slightly different from mine, or if it's the exact opposite and you actually don't like this movie and you still think it glorifies violence, because your thoughts are your own, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even if you weren't planning on seeing this movie, I do believe that this is an important movie for our time. Sometimes art reflects the society that it's made in, like all of those cheesy 80s and 90s action movies. But this film is most of all a character study and also a reflection of today's society and the potential path that we're on. Also, I mentioned earlier that I went to a different theater than our normal AMC theater that we usually go to downtown. This one's much closer, but because I am leaving for Korea in December, me and my wife decided that we're going to try this new theater. It's called Movie and Dinner, and it's attached to the Northern Quest Casino and Resort. And for those of you who are not locals, it's in Spokane, Washington, on the east side of the state. I loved the way the theater was set up. You just walk in, there's like a restaurant on the outside and even a bar, and then you got like 6 or 8 theaters like surrounding it, and you just go in, and it's one of those ones where you sit down, press a button, and just wait for people to take your order. It's one of those, and I don't know, I just love the way that everything was set up. The screen was a good size. The seats were really comfy. Actually, I would say way more comfy than AMC's leather seats, and I love their seats, but yeah, it's more comfortable. And also the food trays were like this really nice dark brown wood that was more than large enough for our food, and actually I will say the wood finish actually felt really nice. And the food that we had there was pretty good. I wasn't able to eat all of mine because I didn't realize that I ordered something that had something in there that I'm mildly allergic to, so I wasn't able to keep going. And it's nothing bad. It's just, I usually get a rash on my backside, but I try not to go any further than that because it's stupid. I have a mild pepperoni allergy. It's really stupid. But anyway, I really enjoyed it, and if you're in the area, just go check it out if you haven't already, or if you ever come in the area, check it out. I'm not sponsored by them, I promise. Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you for watching this video. In a few seconds, we'll have some buttons and stuff pop up. Click on my channel icon to subscribe to the channel and continue your much appreciated support, and you can also check out a couple of other videos on the channel as well, namely the most recently uploaded, which will be on the left side, and then the other one will be a video that's picked at random by a YouTube algorithm that'll be over on the right. So anyway, farewell until the next video, all of you casual moviegoers and movie fans alike, and keep on being awesome.